Howdy, friends. It's story time with Big Ed. So this story goes back to 1996, 97, and my old band, the Highline Riders, we had just gotten our first big record deal, and we were getting ready to go out on our first big tour. And on the eve of that tour, my bass player, who had been with me from the beginning, the only member of the band that had been with me from the beginning, calls me up and says, "Hey man, I need to be paid. I need to be paid for every rehearsal and every gig and blah, 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 blah," which we were going to be paid for every gig anyway. And this stemmed from the guitar player in our band, who was the most talented member of the band by far. He came to me before a rehearsal once and said, "Hey man, I can't rehearse this week." And I said, "Why not?" And he's like, "Well, you know, he gave guitar lessons because he was really good and he had a lot of students." And I said, "Well, what would it take for you to show up to rehearsal?" And he said, "Well, the lesson is $35 at the time. If you can give me $35, I'll come to the rehearsal." Done. He comes to the rehearsal, and I made the mistake of paying him in front of the bass player, even though I explained what it was about. So the bass player called me a week later on the eve of the tour and said, "Hey, I need to be paid. Rehearsals, everything, blah, blah, blah." And he actually was asking for more money than everybody else in the band. So what the bass player didn't know was that at that point, I was his only advocate in the band. The drummer didn't want him anymore. And if the drummer doesn't want you, you're hanging on by a very thin thread. So I said, "Listen, man, I'm sorry. That money for Mike was for missing a lesson with one of his students. You know what the deal is. I'm sorry you feel this way, but I'm sorry to see you go." And we ended up having to hire a bass player for the tour, and henceforth. Now, the lesson there's a couple of lessons. The first one is, don't give out money in front of other members of the band. That's my fault. And don't overestimate your value to your situation. But there's another lesson, and that is, down the road, we went through a succession of bass players. I don't know, 6 maybe at least. And a bunch of drummers, because our drummer was so good, he got picked up by a major touring band. And so we had to schedule around him. It was very fraught, to say the least. And after a while, I got tired of playing band roulette, became a solo artist, moved to Nashville, and started writing and producing for other artists. So the second lesson here is, sometimes fate hands you certain roll of the dice, and you've got to take it and go with it, as I did. Or being in a band and running a band is very, very tricky. It's not an easy endeavor, and it's not for the faint of heart. So if you're going to be in a band, you got to go all the way. And that's on me and all the members, that it's not easy. It's not easy. And if you're the leader, you have to manage it no matter what comes your way. Catch you later.